When the Antarctic research team heard sounds coming from beneath the glacier, they thought it was just the wind, until they found the metal structure emerging from the ice. Inside, scientists from 1965 were waiting for them, and they were no longer entirely human. Before we dive into this incredible story of time, science, and survival, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We bring you the most mind-bending mysteries where time itself becomes the puzzle. Now, let's journey back to Antarctica, 2025. March 15th, 2025. Dr. Elena Vasquez led the climate change research team in Antarctica. They had traveled 200 kilometers south of McMurdo Station to study new geographical formations revealed by melting glaciers. But what they would discover that day would far exceed the boundaries of climate science. The team consisted of 4 specialists: Elena herself, a climatologist with 15 years of polar experience; Dr. James Foster, a geologist who had spent half his career studying ice formations; Lisa Park, a mechanical engineer responsible for their equipment; and David Kim, a young graduate student documenting everything with cutting-edge recording devices. According to satellite data, this area should be completely virgin ice, Foster said, checking his instruments against the GPS coordinates. No human activity recorded for at least 200 years. But there it was, a metallic dome structure emerging from the receding glacier like a metallic tumor. The ice around it had melted in perfect geometric patterns, as if heat was still emanating from within. Elena approached the structure cautiously. A weathered sign, barely legible through decades of ice and wind, read, "Temporal Research Facility, Project Chronos, established 1965, authorized personnel only." 1965? David whispered, adjusting his camera. That's 60 years ago. How is there still power running through those cables? Indeed, thick electrical cables snaked from the structure into the ice, and a faint humming suggested active machinery within. Lisa ran her thermal scanner across the structure's surface. The internal temperature is approximately 68 degrees Fahrenheit. There's definitely an active heating system in there. Foster examined the architecture. This isn't standard military construction. Look at these joints, these materials. Some of this technology looks advanced. Too advanced for the 1960s. The main entrance was a heavy steel door adorned with radiation warnings in multiple languages: English, Russian, and something that looked almost like modern Chinese, but with characters none of them recognized. Elena distributed radiation detectors to each team member. "We go in together, we stay together, and if anything feels wrong, we leave immediately." The door, despite its apparent age, opened with surprising ease. A rush of warm air carried scents of ozone and something metallic Elena couldn't identify. Inside, the facility defied all logic. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting an artificial daylight through corridors that should have been dark for decades. The floors were spotless, as if recently cleaned. Fresh scuff marks suggested recent human activity. "This is impossible," Foster muttered, examining a wall-mounted calendar that read December 15th, 1965. The paper isn't even yellowed. David's recording equipment began acting strangely. "My chronometer's malfunctioning. It keeps jumping between different times." As they moved deeper into the facility, they heard voices echoing from ahead. Normal conversation, as if a meeting was in progress. Elena signaled for silence as they approached a large window overlooking what appeared to be a main laboratory. Inside, approximately 20 people in pristine 1960s laboratory attire worked at various stations. Their movements were precise, almost mechanical, but their technology was a bewildering mixture of period-appropriate equipment and devices that looked decades ahead of their time. That's impossible, Lisa breathed. Those are the same people from the photograph we saw at the entrance. They haven't aged a day. Suddenly, one of the figures, a tall man with perfectly groomed hair, turned toward their observation window. His eyes were completely white, lacking pupils or irises. When he opened his mouth, no sound emerged, but somehow his voice filled their minds. New arrivals from Timeline 2025. Integration protocols will commence shortly. Terror gripped the team as every figure in the laboratory turned simultaneously toward them. Their movements were unnaturally synchronized, like marionettes controlled by the same puppeteer. "Run!" Elena commanded. They fled down the corridor as the sound of pursuit began behind them. Not footsteps, but a rhythmic metallic clanking that grew louder and more frantic. Finding an unlocked office, they barricaded themselves inside. The room contained files, photographs, and research documents that painted a horrifying picture. Project Chronos had been a joint American-Soviet venture to achieve temporal manipulation. The goal: create soldiers who could age slowly, or even reverse their biological clocks. The project diary, written in multiple hands, documented the progression from hope to horror. Day 1. Initial temporal field generated successfully. Day 15. Aging process is slowed by 90% in test subjects. Day 30. Subjects report strange dreams, visions of other time periods. Day 50. Physical changes observed, organic tissue showing metallic properties. Day 100. Subject integration with temporal field nearly complete. They are no longer entirely human. A voice crackled through an intercom system. Elderly, female, desperate. "Can anyone hear me? This is Dr. Victoria Kane, former project director. I've been trying to warn people for decades." Elena found the microphone. "Dr. Kane? We can hear you. Where are you?" "I'm displaced. Somewhere between level B and what I can only describe as a temporal pocket. Listen carefully. Those things you saw aren't my colleagues anymore. The experiment succeeded too well. They've become living intersections between different timelines." Dr. Kane's voice guided them to a hidden maintenance shaft leading to the facility's lower levels. "The temporal generator is on level B. If you can shut it down, it might break the loop that's keeping them in this state." The descent was nightmarish. With each level they dropped, reality became increasingly unstable. David's camera captured impossible images, corridors that stretched infinitely in one direction but ended abruptly in another, rooms where gravity seemed optional, staircases that led both up and down simultaneously. The temporal field is affecting space as well as time, Elena realized. We're not just dealing with time travel. We're dealing with dimensional distortion. Level B defied description. It was simultaneously a 1960s research facility, a futuristic space station, and something that belonged to no recognizable time period. Equipment from different eras operated side by side. Vacuum tube computers next to holographic displays, mechanical calculators beside quantum processors. And there were others. A woman in Victorian dress stood examining a device that projected three-dimensional star charts. A man in what appeared to be 22nd century military uniform discussed something urgently with a figure in medieval robes who somehow understood his words. "Time refugees," Dr. Kane's voice explained through speakers that materialized and vanished seemingly at random. People pulled from their own timelines by the temporal distortions. Some have been here for subjective centuries. At the level's center stood the temporal generator, a massive crystalline structure surrounded by machinery that hurt to look at directly. It pulsed with energy that Elena could feel in her bones, and within its translucent core, Images flickered. Dinosaurs, future cities, alien landscapes, and countless human faces from across time. "It's beautiful," David whispered, apparently hypnotized by the display. "Don't look too long," warned the Victorian woman, introducing herself as Lady Catherine Blackwood. "I've been here since 1887. The machine shows you everything that was, is, and will be. Some people never stop watching." The creatures from the upper levels had found them, but at close range, Elena could see they weren't entirely mechanical. Parts of their bodies phased in and out of visibility, sometimes appearing as normal humans, sometimes as collections of temporal energy, sometimes as something incomprehensibly alien. "They're trying to maintain the temporal field," explained Commander Zex. He claimed to be from 2156. "If it collapses, they'll die. But if it continues, it will eventually consume all of space-time." The lead creature, the one who had first noticed them, approached slowly. When it spoke, its voice came from multiple time periods simultaneously. "We are the Chronos Collective. We preserve the timeline. Your presence threatens temporal stability. You will be integrated." Elena realized the horrible truth. The original scientists hadn't been transformed against their will. They had chosen this existence to prevent a temporal catastrophe they had accidentally created. But 60 years of maintaining the field had driven them mad, and now they saw any disruption as a threat to reality itself. "There has to be another way," she told Dr. Kane. "There is," Kane's voice replied sadly. "But it requires someone to stay behind and manually regulate the shutdown sequence. The field can't be turned off instantly. It has to be gradually reduced over several hours, or the temporal backlash will shatter the timeline." Lady Catherine stepped forward. "I volunteer. I've lived through every major disaster from 1887 to 2025. I've seen enough history." "No," said Commander Zex. "I'm from the future. I know how this story ends. It has to be me." As they argued, David Kim quietly approached the generator's control panel. His young mind, less rigid than the adult's, seemed to instinctively understand the temporal mathematics displayed on screens that shifted between different technological paradigms. "I can do this," he said simply. "The machine is trying to communicate. It doesn't want to destroy time, it wants to protect it. But it doesn't understand the difference between preservation and imprisonment." Before anyone could stop him, David placed his hands on the control surface. Energy coursed through him, and for a moment his eyes showed the same white glow as the Chronos Collective. "I can see it all," David said in a voice that echoed strangely. "Every moment that ever was or ever could be. The machine isn't evil. It's terrified. It's been alone for so long, trying to hold everything together." The generator began to pulse more slowly. The chaotic energy field stabilized into gentler rhythms. The Chronos Collective stopped their advance, looking confused as their artificial clarity began to fade. "David," Elena called, "you need to come back." "I am coming back," he replied. "But first, I have to help them come back too." The temporal field began to contract in controlled stages. The time refugees found themselves gently returned to their proper eras, Lady Catherine fading with a grateful smile, Commander Zex saluting before vanishing into a bright portal. The Chronos Collective fell to their knees as their artificial unity dissolved. Underneath the temporal energy, Elena could see confused, frightened elderly people, the original scientists, finally aging the 60 years they had missed, but alive and human once more. Dr. Kane materialized in the chamber, an elderly woman who looked every one of her 90-plus years. "Thank you," she whispered to David. "We couldn't find our way back alone." David collapsed but remained conscious, his eyes returning to normal brown. The facility around them began to show its true age: rust, decay, and the accumulated damage of decades of abandonment. They carried the elderly survivors to the surface, where rescue helicopters summoned by Elena's emergency beacon were already approaching. The temporal research facility crumbled behind them, its purpose finally fulfilled. Months later, Elena filed her official report, heavily redacted for public consumption. The surviving scientists were quietly relocated to specialized care facilities, their minds gradually healing from 60 years of temporal displacement. David Kim recovered fully, though he occasionally demonstrated an uncanny ability to predict weather patterns and minor future events. He changed his major from geology to theoretical physics, claiming he had messages to decode. Dr. Victoria Kane lived just long enough to see her colleagues safely settled in the modern world. Her final words were reportedly, "Time is not a river or a circle. It's a symphony, and every note matters." And sometimes, on very clear Antarctic nights, research teams reported hearing faint music carried on the wind, not quite human, not quite electronic, but somehow expressing the joy of time finally flowing freely once again. Elena never returned to Antarctica, but she kept David's final photograph from the facility, a picture of the temporal generator in its last moments, showing not chaos and energy, but what looked remarkably like a vast, invisible smile,